Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive new scoping review from Samsara. And honestly, it challenges pretty much everything we think we know about how medical treatments get greenlit. You know the phrase, right? FDA approved. It's on the news. It's at the doctor's office. It's literally printed on our prescription bottles. But what does that stamp actually mean? Today, we're walking through a comprehensive evidence map to figure out exactly where regulatory authorization ends and where real-world uncertainty begins. So, what does FDA approval actually guarantee? Now, most of us, myself included, kind of just assume it means a drug or device is definitively proven to be 100% safe, perfectly effective, and broadly applicable to everyone. But, well, the data synthesized in this major scoping review tells a much, much more nuanced story. It actually suggests we need to completely reframe how we view this crucial regulatory hurdle. There is just this massive gap between what we expect and the regulatory reality. On one hand, we expect proven comparative effectiveness, totally comprehensive safety, widespread patient access, the whole shebang. But on the other hand, the researchers found that the dominant signal across all these diverse product classes is that FDA approval frequently happens under what they call residual evidentiary uncertainty. Basically, a product is allowed on the market, sure, but there are still major unresolved clinical questions about how well it actually works and who it works best for. To map out this investigation, we're going to quickly walk through 6 key areas: the FDA approval misconception, thin trials and surrogate endpoints, rushing it with expedited pathways, missing patients in safety, what happens after approval, and finally, closing the evidence gap. All right, moving into section 1, the FDA approval misconception. Let's look at the sheer scale of the evidence behind this myth-busting analysis. The researchers didn't just look at isolated failures or a single recalled product. They aggregated an enormous amount of data. We're talking 69 original studies, encompassing nearly 750,000 participants, from cancer drugs and biologics to artificial intelligence medical devices. And across all of these, they found a systemic pattern of approval under uncertainty. This isn't just a few outliers, it is baked right into the system. Which brings us to section 2, thin trials and surrogate endpoints. To understand how these therapies actually get approved, we really need to look at a concept called surrogate endpoints. Basically, these are substitute measures. So a drug might successfully change a lab number on a blood test, or maybe it shrinks a tumor on a scan. That sounds great, right? But as the review points out, hitting those substitute targets doesn't automatically mean the patient actually lives longer or feels better. Unfortunately, FDA approvals, especially for things like oncology and Alzheimer's, frequently rely on these surrogate outcomes, and their connection to actual patient-centered benefits can be surprisingly inconsistent. Let me put a stark number on this disconnect for you. The data shows that newly approved cancer drugs yielded a median overall survival gain of, wait for it, just 2.80 months. That's it. They might have hit all the marks according to specific trial metrics, but the actual median survival gain for the real-world patient is incredibly small. Plus, health-related quality of life was only reported in about half of the cancer drug trials leading to approval. So we often don't even know if those few extra months are spent actually feeling well or just suffering from severe toxicity. Let's head into section 3, rushing it with expedited pathways. When there's a high medical need, the push for speed can sometimes totally outpace the actual science. This timeline shows the flawed life cycle we frequently see with fast-track treatments. A drug gets expedited at year 0 because of an unmet need. By year 1, it gets approved, often based on those surrogate endpoints we just talked about. But here's the kicker. The follow-up trials to confirm the drug actually works long-term are often delayed, or they flat-out fail around year 3. And yet, moving into year 5 and beyond, these failed indications can just linger on drug labels for years, while real people continue to take them. The risk of this expedited process is absolutely staggering. Among accelerated cancer approvals, only 43% actually demonstrated clinical benefit in their subsequent confirmatory trials. Basically, less than a coin flip. That means over half either failed to show they worked or were eventually withdrawn. And get this, breakthrough designated oncology drugs had shorter approval times, but didn't show statistically significant improvements in efficacy or safety compared to non-breakthrough drugs. It turns out, moving fast doesn't always mean making better medicine. Let's look at section 4, missing patients and safety. We have to ask, who is actually participating in these pivotal trials before a drug hits the broad market? Well, the review maps out severe demographic gaps across multiple fields. In cardiovascular trials, Black participants and women are heavily underrepresented. Ophthalmology trials show persistent racial and ethnic gaps relative to who actually suffers from the diseases. And AI tools often completely lack globally inclusive evidence. What this means is that the highly controlled, very narrow populations testing the drugs rarely match the diverse reality of the everyday patients who will eventually take them. To show you how remarkably thin these trials can actually be, the median sample size among the original human studies analyzed was just 145 participants. Literally, just 145 people. That's like the size of a small college lecture hall. It's almost hard to believe such a tiny slice of the population is used to determine nationwide safety and effectiveness for a brand new product. When you extrapolate a trial of 145 people to millions of real-world patients, things can get very dangerous very quickly. Because of these limited trials, massive safety risks often aren't fully understood until the drug is actively prescribed. For instance, the review notes CAR T therapy approvals were associated with cytokine release syndrome, which is basically a severe systemic immune overreaction in an astonishing 94% of patients. On top of that, 87% experienced severe neurologic toxicities. These aren't minor headaches. We're talking serious damage or dysfunction to the brain and nervous system. These are massive side effects that require intense, real-world risk mitigation way after that initial stamp of approval. Moving right along to Section 5, what happens after approval? So what exactly happens after the FDA gives the green light and the therapy steps out of the lab? The data shows a harsh reality check where controlled trial success frequently collides with real-world complications. Take medical devices. In highly controlled trials for a specific heart device, procedural success was an incredible 95.6%. But out in the real world, serious complications popped up, like procedure-related strokes and pericardial tamponade, which is a really dangerous buildup of fluid around the heart. And beyond physical safety, there are massive implementation barriers. FDA approval definitely does not guarantee insurance coverage. Access is often blocked by prior authorization or step therapy, creating huge inequities where vulnerable populations are less likely to get the treatments they need. Finally, Section 6, closing the evidence gap. How do the researchers suggest we fix this broken life cycle? Well, the central takeaway we need to embrace is captured perfectly right here. FDA approval should be interpreted as a regulatory milestone, not the finish line, the starting line. It's a signal that a product might be helpful, but we, as patients and clinicians, need to stay incredibly vigilant. To actually close this gap between regulatory authorization and demonstrated patient benefit, the paper lays out some concrete steps. First, mandate timely, well-designed confirmatory trials with strict consequences if they fail or get delayed. Second, rigorously validate those surrogate endpoints so we know what changing lab number actually means a healthier patient. Third, set prospective, equitable enrollment benchmarks so drugs are tested on the diverse populations that will actually use them. And fourth, expand our real-world safety networks to actively track high-risk therapies long after they hit the market. This leaves us with a final, provocative thought to ponder. If regulatory authorization is truly just the beginning of the evidence journey, how do we ensure patients aren't unwittingly becoming the final experiment? It's a question that demands better data, more transparent trials, and continuous monitoring from all of us. Keep that in mind the next time you hear a medical breakthrough is FDA approved. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep demanding the evidence.